Who are you? What's your role and where do you work?
Hey, I'm Nick Eberts. I'm a PM at Google on the GKE team, and I work on fleets and teams.
What are 3 Kubernetes emerging tools that you're keeping an eye on?
Definitely heavy in the platform engineering space, so anything that's going to help make the UX for developers easier to consume Kubernetes. I'm interested in working on normalizing fleets for all of our customers, upstream multi-cluster SIG cluster profile initiative. And the last thing is getting HPA to scale to 0, which I think is super important, especially around the AI/ML inferencing space.
Can I do a bonus question?
Yeah.
You tweeted not that long ago that platform engineering is something that we've been doing for a long time. Would you care to elaborate on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, platform engineering is a fancy word for something that I personally have been involved with since Kubernetes was born, and I'm sure that was established even earlier than that, right? It's just this idea that the abstraction, or Kubernetes itself, might not be the right abstraction for every user. And I would even consider that if you're shipping a Helm values file to an end user, you're sort of giving them a platform. So yes, we've been doing this for a real long time.
Questions responding to our podcast. On the subject of multi-tenancy, our guest Artem shared that between a single cluster with multiple environments and dedicated clusters per environment, the latter is easier to manage for a small team. When you share a cluster with multiple teams, should you share a single cluster or offer a dedicated cluster per tenant? What does your choice depend on?
I actually don't want that choice to have to be so apparent. So at Google, we built this thing called Teams, right, which is tenancy as a service. And the idea here is that we're abstracting that decision for later, right? So if today, single cluster tenancy or multi-cluster single tenancy is the best solution for you, good. But if that changes over time, it should be a simple change that you make to the binding of a team. So I'm not going to say which one is right, because that really depends on your use case, but I don't think that there's a blanket answer for even within one organization. I think some clusters will be single tenant, and then you'll have multi-tenant clusters on the side that are running smaller, less business critical applications.
Related to the topic of auto-scaling and Keta specifically, our guest Jorge argued that Kubernetes-based scaling solutions like Keta offer advantages over traditional monitoring tools like Prometheus, especially regarding responsiveness. How do you auto-scale workloads in Kubernetes? What metrics do you use, and are there any tips and tricks that people should know?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So auto scaling, definitely there is a latency if you're using external metrics adapters. So using an internal, like custom metrics adapter, you can hit like a local Prometheus endpoint. But I think the more important question is, how can I actually scale to 0? So what Keta gives me is an ability to scale to 0. I can't do that with the HPA today. While technically it can scale to 0, there needs to be a proxy in play that will get it from 0 to 1. So I'm much more interested in focusing on normalizing getting scale to 0 with the HPA, and I think that's where we need to take the upstream project.
Cattle versus pets.
Yeah.
Infrastructure as code.
Nah.
Dan Garfield, who's probably standing right over there,
I was just hanging out with him.
shared that your cluster only feels real once you set up ingress and DNS. Before that, it was just a playground where it didn't matter when stuff broke. What are your thoughts on this?
So, I mean, I'm totally in the team of fungible clusters, right? So the cluster shouldn't be super important. It should have like a shape or an identity. And once you bring that cluster into the world, you give it a label and it knows what job it needs to do. But that is required. There's a lot of required components that need to work for that to actually be feasible, right? You need multi-cluster gateways. You need load balancers that can go across multiple clusters. You need service discovery across multiple clusters. So these are all tools that we're working on bringing to the upstream, but already work on GKE, right? So this idea that you can use a multi-cluster gateway or multi-cluster services to abstract the cluster so that you can add a cluster, and if it has the right label, everything comes up to state. And to Dan's point, internet access or access from outside the cluster is just there because the load balancer already existed. So I think it's super important to get these multi-cluster tools more accessible to everyone, all the end users out there for Kubernetes.
Kubernetes turned 10 years old this year.
Yeah.
What should we expect in the next 10 years to come?
More Kubernetes. I think we'll continue to see emergence of very specific platforms that are good for a specific type of workload, right? And so the brilliance of Kubernetes is I can run a plethora of different types of workloads, right? And that maybe not require the same UX to every single end user. And the more that I can just go out there and buy a canned solution, I think for a lot of our enterprise customers, that's going to make them more successful. So I look forward to seeing very point solutions for platform type feel for a specific workload type on top of Kubernetes.
If you had to choose, what's your least favorite Kubernetes feature?
Long-term support. We don't need it. I don't think that we should do it. We're probably going to get forced to, but I do believe that we should make updating and upgrading easier so customers don't need to worry about long-term support. But long-term support itself, it's the analogy is we're just making a bigger cup that has a slow leak of water, and the cup gets bigger, and then after 1 year or 2 years, it's still going to start to overflow, and it's a one-time pass. So I don't think LTS is the answer for those customers out there.
What's next for you?
I am going to Cube Jam to play guitar with you, my friend.
What about professionally?
Oh, nothing. A retirement. I have no professional ambition at all other than to make multi-cluster stuff work for the community.
How can people get in touch with you?
They can get me on Blue Sky or Twitter. I don't actually remember what my handle is. Hopefully you can put a little bird up.